About a decade ago, a behavioral science experiment was conducted in San Marcos, California, during the hot months of summer. The experiment sought to determine what, if anything, could motivate people to conserve energy. Graduate students placed informative door ads on thousands of homes throughout San Marcos. Each door ad presented the same request. They asked residents there to turn off their air conditioning and switch over to fans, something that here in Houston would be unfathomable. But in California, it's not so bad. Well, the request was the same on each of the door ads, but the reason for this request was slightly different on each ad. A quarter of the households received a message telling them that turning their air conditioning off and switching to fans would save them significant savings in their electric bills. A second version of this same message indicated that replacing fans with their air conditioning would lower the carbon footprint, thus helping the environment. A third group received a message telling them that such actions would help their local community by avoiding summer rolling blackouts. And the remaining quarter of the households received the following message. When surveyed, 77% of your neighbors said that they turn off their air conditioning during the hot summer months and switch to fans. Please join them. Now, the results of this behavioral study are very interesting, and I will share them with you a little bit later in the sermon. But what I'd like you to consider right now is which of these door ads would have motivated you? Would you have been more motivated by financial incentives or by the concept of lowering the carbon footprint or by helping your local community by avoiding rolling blackouts or by the desire to do as well as, if not better than, your neighbors? At this season in particular, when we spend a great deal of time calculating ways to improve ourselves, knowing what motivates us can be very, very helpful. If we can understand this about ourselves, if we can understand what makes us tick, we can improve our capacity to monitor our actions and remain accountable to the promises that we're making. Most of our promises concern our relationships. We might seek to make changes in our behaviors at home, with our parents, our spouses, our children, or our siblings. Sometimes our concerns are about work, how we might act or perform at work, or perhaps they're about our interactions with complete strangers. Other promises might concern personal goals like improving our health, finding ways to become more involved in the community, or finding resources so that we can be more philanthropic. For all these promises that we make and so many more during these days of the High Holy Days, our coming together to worship, our coming together for these sacred group gatherings, are ways of bringing all of these issues of life into focus. The time that we set aside for worship and contemplation help us strategize ways to be better in all areas of our lives. But when it comes to translating the promises that we make in our hearts into actions in the world, this is where we often fall short. Now, sometimes we're really good at first. Motivated by the spiritual momentum of these holy days, we tend to have more personal accountability for the promises that we make. It's not unlike what happens during the month of July in the world of fitness centers. You know, as people make their New Year's resolutions with regards to their health or their weight, health club memberships peak, and people flock to the gym. And the gym is very, very busy. It's hard to find equipment. That is until about mid-February when people start to ease back into their old routines and behavior patterns. The challenge for us is to figure out what motivates us to remain accountable for the promises that we are making, not for the short term, but for the long term. How do we hold ourselves to the task? Now let's return to that behavior science study that took place in San Marcos, California. Of the 4 door ads, which one do you think would have had the most profound effect on people's behavior? This is a show of hands. Who thinks most people would have mostly been affected or influenced or motivated by savings on their energy bills? Got lots of hands out there, just sharing that with the streamers. What about lowering the carbon footprint? Who thinks that would have motivated some in California? You know, this is a liberal place. Oh, we got a few more hands. How about helping your community by avoiding rolling blackouts? And what about switching to fans because your neighbors are switching to fans? We got lots of hands up. Well, those of you who had your hands up for the 4th one were right. In fact, the study showed, which was much to the surprise of the graduate students doing the study showed that the first 3 had 0 impact whatsoever on people's behavior patterns. The graduate students thought that it would be financial incentive, and they were very, very surprised that that didn't change people's habits at all. The only one that changed people's habits was the one which asked residents to join the majority of their neighbors who were already making concerted efforts to save energy. So what does that tell us about human behavior? What does that tell us about us? It indicates that we can be highly motivated by social pressures, and that this kind of motivation can be a very, very powerful source for good in the world. That is why we are all here today. That is why we are all gathered in mass. That is why so many people come together during the high holidays more than any other time of the year, to make our promises in a large group, to focus on the purposes of the season in a large group, rather than taking a stroll in the park and just contemplating these same ideas by oneself. On Rosh Hashana, and again on Yom Kippur, we come together as a community to make our promises for personal change in a public forum. There is a social and communal dimension to what we do here each year as we collectively articulate where we have gone astray. While each of us must take full responsibility for the transgressions and misguided behaviors within our lives, our coming together as a community reminds us that we are not alone in this task. We are not alone. All of us have misguided behaviors. All of us are here for the same purpose. And it's articulated very powerfully in the liturgy which we read during this season. I like to remind us of this very regularly during these holy days, that our prayers are said in a collective we. They are not said in the singular I. We do not say, for the sin I have committed against you, but rather for the sins we have committed against you. Why is this? Because we articulate these prayers each year to remind ourselves that we are part of a faith community in which everyone is responsible for one another. The social/communal dynamic, which was proven to be so powerful in the study that was done in San Marcos, is also central to how Jews have long understood the process of behavioral transformation. Knowing that the people in front of you, the people behind you, the people sitting right next to you are here for that same purpose is an incredibly powerful motivator. Now, it's one thing to find motivation in this sense of collective, communal gathering. But it's another thing to remain accountable for the promises that we are making. Maintaining personal accountability demands some kind of ongoing monitoring. One technological model for encouraging us to maintain and monitor our behaviors day to day has become a very popular trend in society. In fact, some of you may be wearing them on your wrist right now. I am. These little black watches, if you have one. These Fitbits or Apple Watches or whatever other kinds of electronic pedometers that have become so popular these days have done so for a very important reason. Raise your hand if you actually have a Fitbit or monitor your exercise on a daily basis through maybe your cell phone or something. We've got a few people. They'll be changing in a few years, I promise you that. Well, those of you who have raised your hands, how many have noticed that you're actually changing some of your behavior patterns? We have some hands up also. Well, the reason for this is because the human capacity to maintain goals and promises are greatly enhanced by our abilities to monitor ourselves. We like feedback. We like knowing that we have reached goals. We like knowing when we have not met those goals, when we have fallen short, and we like to reassess ourselves according to those goals and the feedback that we receive. I happen to wear a Fitbit, which was given to me by my mother for my birthday this past April. Thank you, Mom, who's streaming right now. It was a nice gift. The Fitbit has a preset 10,000 step goal for each day. And before I received this very interesting little gift, I had no idea how sedentary I was. It was depressing. The first day that I looked at my Fitbit, I had only walked 2,000 steps, not even close to the 10,000. Now, for me and millions of others, this simple monitoring provided moment-to-moment feedback. It provided positive reinforcement and an ongoing sense of accountability for personal fitness objectives. In my case, it was literally just a matter of days before that 10,000 step preset goal became somewhat of an obsession. Instead of sitting at my desk in my office, I would get up and walk around the temple a couple of times to get my blood flowing. If I walked by the stairs in the hallway there, I'd walk up and down about 5 or 6 times just to get the heart rate up and get credit for steps. If I was going to the grocery store, I'd park at a faraway parking space, so then I get more steps in, but I go into the store, then walk in the store, and then go back out to my car. I'd get home, and I'd look at my watch, they'd say, oh my gosh, I'm only 2,000 steps away. I'd go for a walk around the block so I could get it out of the way before I entered the house. It changes your goals. And what I was not expecting, however, while it did change my own goals, it changed the mindset of my entire household. You see, my mom wisely also bought a Fitbit for Becky, and she's very competitive. So when she would get home, she'd go, how many steps you got? And then we would go for a walk together around the block to try to get to that goal. But it even changed our children's mindset. They were competing. Who has more steps, Mom or Dad? And finally, Simon asked for, there he is right there waving his hands, Simon wanted a Fitbit for his birthday and now is constantly poking us, competing with us, telling us that we need to have more steps because he can actually monitor what we are doing day to day. I really believe that in the coming years, these little devices are actually going to become more and more popular. Why? Because they tap into our desire to measure our successes and engage each other in a relational accountability. We are social beings, and our sense of personal accountability seems to increase exponentially when we are in the context of a community. Would that we had these little devices for the promises that we make during these holy days to keep us on task, to monitor whether or not we are staying the course. But we don't. But we do have something. We can find inspiration in that social science experiment that took place in San Marcos, California. We might be able to use the concept of something like a door ad to monitor and encourage us to stay the course. And so I encourage all of us to spend at least a few days thinking about this and then applying what you want to change in your life to your own door ad. Now, those of you who received the bulletin in the mail know that I took the liberty of sending blank door ads to everyone in the congregation so that you would take the time to fill out your own door ad. Now, if you didn't get one, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. You can use a piece of paper. You can use a large Post-it note. But take the time to write down the following 3 things. 1, what you hope to change in yourself over the course of the next year. Then 2, how you intend to accomplish that change. And 3, how you intend to monitor yourself as the year goes on. Here's my door ad right here. In the coming year, I will be more patient and present with my family. I will accomplish this by listening more, inquiring more, and breathing. And I will monitor my progress by making small notes as the year goes on or taking pictures of those accomplishments as they unfold over the course of the year. That way I have an ongoing journal of how things have evolved. I'd like you to do the same. Write it down. And when you're done, don't stop there. Share it with your family and friends. I just shared mine with you. And ask them to support you in your efforts to uphold these promises. Then, hang your door ad or your Post-it on a door, or tape it to the mirror, or hang it in your car, wherever you might see it on a regular basis, to remind yourself of these promises and the path that you are setting out for yourself. If you stray, redirect yourself. Now, this is your task over the course of the next 10 days. Remember, 77% of your fellow congregants said that they were going to write down what they intend to change in themselves over the course of the next year. And they are committed to remaining accountable for what they write down. Please join them. Shana Tova.